I get asked quite often, is there a bubble in Bali real estate? And I wonder that myself every time I drive across the island and see all the huge construction sites. The whole island seems to be a one big construction site. So that is really scary if you're thinking about investing in Bali real estate and the idea that you built this villa, a townhouse, apartment, whatever it is, but by the time you're finished, there are 10 more and they're all empty. That's really scary. So let's look into the Bali real estate and what are the sizes? What is the market really looking like? And is there a bubble building up in Bali? Now, a typical real estate bubble, and we've seen so many in the last years, right, is prices for real estate go up. They go up really fast. And at some point, they're so far away from what is sustainable, what's reasonable for the market, that they just collapse. The bubble bursts. So, for example, imagine a condo or multiple condos, many units, very, very similar. And they're traded. One sells his unit to someone else for, let's say, $5,000 per square meter, whatever. And that is the benchmark. Everyone sees that transaction and everyone knows that is the market price right now. So they would not be willing to sell for any less than that, but slightly more. So the next day, someone else sells his unit, very similar to the first one, for a little bit more. And the next day, someone else, again, slightly more. And because that is the market price, everyone thinks that is okay. But in that scheme, you can grow the prices really, really fast. And if the prices go up 10% a year, after 4 or 5 years, you've reached 50% growth. And the underlying fundamentals do not support that. There aren't that many people who can actually afford to live there, to pay the rent. It doesn't make any sense for them. And that's when the prices collapse. When more people sell than buy, and they sell for less than what they paid for, and that's when it collapses. Often these bubbles are driven with leveraged buyers, so mortgages back up the prices, and banks also look at the market price. So what were the recent transactions? And that is considered the market price and therefore okay to pay. Now that's not really looking at the fundamentals, right? Fundamentals in a residential real estate market would be something like, what is the ratio of the income of the people who live there and the cost of living there, or the cost of renting or owning? So for example, the average person in an area makes $100,000. Is it possible to buy this kind of real estate with an annual cost of $30,000, a third of the average salary? So basically, is an average salary person able to afford an average real estate in that area? That would be considered fundamentally sound and sustainable. Everything beyond that is a bit of a problem. And if it goes really far away from that, it should be a red flag and better stay away from that. Now, Bali real estate is different. That is vacation rental real estate. So here we have to look at other fundamental data to judge whether the prices and the volume that is being built still make sense, or is it also something you should stay away from? So let's have a look at the market in Bali. On the supply side, there are about 55,000 bedrooms in rated hotels. That means hotels with a star rating, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars. And another 34,000 roughly in other hotels, guest houses, homestays that don't have a star rating. So that adds up to nearly 90,000. On top of that, there are more than 4,000 villas, and they have roughly a bit more than 10,000 bedrooms. So all in all, Bali will have slightly more than 100,000 bedrooms available for tourists to stay there on a short-term rental. Now, on the demand side, it's been quite a roller coaster ride for the last years. There's no stable baseline. It has, over the COVID years, gone down and then up again. The last stable year really was 2019. There we saw about 6 million international arrivals. And on top, we have domestic arrivals, also via the airport, and as well also via ferry. A lot of domestic tourists come from Java over with their car. They use the ferry, and that way they have their car available in Bali as well. And of course, a lot fly in. The domestic flights are fairly cheap. So 6 million international tourist arrivals and another roughly 10 million domestic ones. That adds up to 16 million visitors a year. And the average stay duration is only roughly 3 nights. So that makes about 48 million nights that people stay here. If we divide that by 365 days, we end up with roughly 130,000 tourists on an average daily basis in the island. So 130,000 tourists staying in slightly more than 100,000 bedrooms. One bedroom can, of course, either have 1 or 2 persons. So in average, let's say 1.8. So these 100,000 bedrooms can host 180,000, can be considered full with 180,000 tourists, 130,000 in average over the 180,000 capacity. So that's roughly 70% occupancy over the entire island over the whole year. So that's the market roughly as it looks like today, 2019, trying to phase out all the COVID craziness. Now, the big question is the supply side growing faster than the demand side? And that's, of course, looking into the future, and that means a lot of guesswork. So when we look at the increase on the supply side, we can have a look at the construction that's going on the island. And that's exactly what is one of the concerns we have, that they build too much, right? No matter where we look, we see construction sites. But let's look at the numbers here. When we think of a very large construction site, it typically will take 3-4 years for the construction to finish. Let's say Hidden City Ubud is one of the larger ones. Then total, that's 186 bedrooms over 3 years. So it's only about 60 bedrooms per year. Now, a similar large hotel will also take 3 or 4 years of construction and might have 300, 400 bedrooms. And that means it's a very large hotel already. So even the largest developments will add about 100 bedrooms per year annualized. And there aren't not that many on the whole island. So maybe 500, 600, 700 just for the large developments. And then, of course, we have a multitude of smaller developments. Let's think of villa or maybe even a townhouse development with 5 to 10 townhouses. So these, even the townhouses, would typically not have more than 10 to 20 bedrooms annualized on an annual basis. And of course, a villa typically takes between 1 and 2 years construction time and has between 1 and 5 bedrooms typically. So all of these, and these are hard to count, right? Especially when you consider how the building permits are handled in Bali. But let's say, including the large projects and the multitude of small ones, we have about 2,000 bedrooms annually additional capacity. that would only add about 2% to the overall capacity per year. And that's roughly in line with what we see on the statistics in the hotel area only. That's something where we have better statistics because hotels work together in hotel associations and all that. So there are some statistics available. And the growth rate here is only about 2% a year. And that in itself is not really concerning at all. Now, on the demand side, basically we need to have more than 2% growth here, and that seems reasonable when we look at the development since, let's say, 2015, where it has been growing quite a lot until, of course, COVID hit. More like 10% a year, but it's not a steady development, and one year can be bad, next can be great. So it's very, very hard to predict. We've seen the Chinese stopping to come with COVID, and they are not fully coming back. So it's very, very hard to predict. We have more Russians now on the island, less Chinese, all that. It's very hard to predict, but 2% or more seems very, very doable compared to what we've seen in the past. So that's also not really a concern. The 70% current occupancy rate is fairly low, also when you compare it with Phuket or big cities, but it has been working for the hotel industry to make a living. Now, of course, so far we looked at the whole island, everything, all the areas, all the types of accommodation, from hotel to villa, townhouse, guest house, homestay, everything. And when the market overall looks okay, that doesn't mean all the segments are okay. Of course, 70% overall occupancy rate, that means there are areas in the island or segments on the island that are much worse, maybe 50%, and others that are doing great. So whenever you're building something or you're planning a construction or an investment, you have to segment the market and make sure you invest in a segment that is doing much better than the overall market. So the total amount of construction on the island is not really what I'm personally concerned about. The second concern here is the prices. The prices have gone up. So let's say a year ago, you could buy a townhouse, one-bedroom townhouse in a decent area for maybe between 150 and 180,000 US dollar. Now they're asking between 250 and 270,000 US dollar. So the prices have gone up a lot. You're not getting more for your money. And you have to make the calculation. Is it still worth it for that money? What is the return on investment? What is the yield on my investment, including the cost of capital, the depreciation, because these two aspects have changed a lot. The depreciation is increasing with the higher prices, and the cost of capital is increasing with the higher purchasing prices, as well as with higher interest rates. So these two factors are putting a big pressure on all ongoing investments here in the island. So with that, you have to really make the calculation for each individual project. But as the island itself, as an overall market, it's doing okay. However, watch the prices more than the overall amount of construction that's happening in the island. And of course, also check the segment. There are segments in the island where I would not invest. So segment the market that you want to invest in from location to type of investment. So number of bedrooms for a villa, one bedroom versus a 6-bedroom, for example. Look at that. Micro location must be good. Overall location, of course, can't just build somewhere at the end of the world a big palace and think the people will come. That's not going to happen. So you have to identify the attractive segments of the market and invest there, and also make sure you're not overpaying for whatever you're investing in. So with all that said, is Bali real estate in a bubble? I would say no, not yet, but you have to watch the prices. These are really a concern. If you're overpaying at the construction time, then you might not be able to recover your investment. So as always, be careful when you invest. Make a good calculation on the investment, on everything. Don't trust the sales guys. Do your own due diligence, analyze the market, and follow this channel for more analysis on the real estate markets in the Southeast Asia region.